Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate day 47. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, Russian President Vladimir Putin threatened to finish off Ukrainian troops. This announcement comes as Washington tries to get the two nations to speak with one another about a peace deal, but speculation continues to grow about Putin's commitment to a peace deal. Earlier today, Vice President and Second Lady Vance arrived in Greenland. The second couple took the opportunity to visit American service members stationed at the U.S. Space Force base there.
How we doing? It's cold as here. Nobody told me. Well, thank you all for everything you do, and thanks for having us. So please sit down, guys. Please. I want you to eat your food. Usha and I are thrilled to be here. It's a really beautiful flight, actually. You fly over some pretty cool spots. I've never been to Greenland. Apparently, I'm the first vice president to ever visit Greenland, so that's a pretty cool thing.
The D.C. Circuit Court told Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that he can't enforce President Trump's executive order barring people who identify as transgender from the military. Judge Benjamin Settle said the Trump administration offered no explanation as to why transgender troops should suddenly be banned. Judge Settle actually lives in Washington state, nearly 3,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. The Trump administration is calling on the Supreme Court to intervene in these left-wing judicial blockades. Here's Deputy Press Secretary Harrison Field on a district judge blocking mass deportations.
What we are doing is going to the high court and telling them something has to be done. You cannot have the judiciary acting as somehow a higher branch of government in which all three branches are co-equal. I would challenge Judge Boasberg to reread the Constitution and understand that his actions and the actions of this D.C. appeals court, which is essentially doubling down on the unconstitutional behavior of Judge Boasberg, to reread the Constitution and understand Article 2. If they did that, they would have thrown out this case from the beginning. We have full confidence that the U.S. Supreme Court will stand for the Constitution and stand with President Trump on this matter.
The Department of Agriculture is now helping the Department of Education look into a California law that stops schools from telling parents about their kids' gender identity. They're trying to figure out if this law breaks federal rules that say parents have the right to know what's going on with their children at school. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is not coping well with the Trump agenda, and he suggested a shadow government to protest Trump's and his latest move towards secure elections. Take a look.
We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote. This is one of the things, though, that this is going to take power to the streets. And look, I don't know what the answer is on this, but I've been saying this. I think we need a shadow government, so when all these things come up every single day, we've got an alternate press conference telling the truth about what things are happening, telling what's going out.
Tell me Democrats wouldn't freak out if they heard that from the other side. Donald Trump has also set his sights on cleaning up Washington, D.C. A recent executive order establishes a task force that will prevent crime, punish criminals, preserve order, protect American monuments, promote beautification, and preserve America's history and heritage. Alina Habba, who's currently a counselor to President Trump, was also sworn in as a U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. Watch.
4 years ago, he entrusted faith in me as his personal attorney, and I have been on the journey of a lifetime every single day for that. But I have also been with him through some very dark days when I lost faith in our justice system, when I saw things that I never, ever thought I would ever see. And from being outside the courtroom steps, defending him and defending our great nation, I saw the most resilience I've ever seen in my life. This man kept fighting for America, and I'm just so honored that now I get to fight for the state of New Jersey. I will do a good job, sir. I will clean it up, and we're going to make New Jersey great again. Thank you so much.
I feel like we're on the journey of a lifetime. Every single day, let's go ahead and bring in Blaze News Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson. Journey is all around. Let's talk about the journey through the trans military ban right now, because they're saying, hey, the government hasn't done enough in order to get this through.
This is really disturbing. It really is unconscionable. It's the sort of thing that should be considered unconstitutional, right? What the judge is doing here. The idea that a judge can tell the Secretary of Defense that he can't say no to mentally ill people who want to mutilate their own genitals is insane. I mean, it really is insane. And so, the real question is, on what authority does the judge think that he can do this? And we live in what the kids used to call a clown world. I mean, the idea that this is a clown world, this is a perfect example of this. Does anyone really think that if you went back to the founding generation and the early American Republic, that the authors of the Constitution and the first governments that really made it what it was and sort of defined it out by by creating the government of the United States of America, does anyone really think that they would say, no, there are people who have absolutely every right, they have rights given by God and nature to mutilate themselves, who are in deep sexual confusion? Like, this is crazy, right? And the thing about the military is, who's going to determine military readiness? Well, the Secretary of Defense is going to do that, not some random judge. So the good thing about this is that I think people are starting to realize how crazy this is. And I think a majority of Americans are willing to say enough. But the bad part of it is that they're destroying the credibility of the judiciary.
Well, I'm certain that the authors of the Constitution did not have a shadow government in place from one of the governors of one of the 50 states here in the United States. What is your take when you hear Tim Walz saying, I think we should have a shadow government in place just in case? Well, one, that is what we're trying to fight against here with the mandate, is Trump against the deep state. Yeah. That is what the deep state is the shadow government. And the American people have said, you know what, we've had enough of this. Yeah,
you're so right. I mean, the shadow government already exists. We know it already exists. We know where it is. It's all throughout the layers of bureaucracy. It's all the people who are leaking sensitive information, unprecedented leaks in the last Trump administration, stuff that would never have been leaked before. People would have gone to prison. So that is the shadow government. It is in place. And Walz is just saying the quiet part out loud. But it is interesting, like you say, if the shoe was on the other foot, this happens to Trump all the time, right? And Walz could say in that clip, look, I was just saying we should have press conferences and, whatever. They would take that quote and they would say, this is worse than an insurrection. He's a traitor and he should go to jail.
Well, when we come back, former Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows will give us his take on judges blocking the MAGA mandate. Next. All right, listen up. This is big because we have Frontier by Blaze Media, and it's back with issue 2. So, Peterson, I'm going to bring you in for this one because Frontier issue 1 was tremendous. Frontier issue 2 looks even better, right? It's the American flag, it's SpaceX, it's all the cool things that if you're following anything like on X or the socials, people are so interested in what's going on right now.
Yeah, and look, this is not easy to do, if I don't say so myself. I mean, and my team did all the work on it. This is something where it's like a book. I mean, this is the quality of a book. It's the thickness of a book. This thing is full of photography. It's full of articles that have really, painstaking writing, incredible writing. Our own Matt Himes wrote about losing his house in the Palisades fire. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. This is one of Elon's favorite photographers on the cover. So a lot goes into this, and I think you'll find it worthwhile.
Yeah, you can only get it, though, with Blaze Unlimited, and you get all the VIP access and exclusive content. There's so much that goes along with this. And the first 500 subscribers get issues 1 and 2, plus $40 off when you use code BLAZE500 at blazeunlimited.com/BNT. This isn't just about reading Frontier. It's about living it. So don't wait now. Go get it now before it's too late. Here we go again. We're back in the courtroom over one of the hottest issues in the military. A federal judge has now ruled that President Trump's executive order banning transgender individuals from serving openly in the military discriminated against 7 plaintiffs. The judge basically said, show me the proof that this affects readiness. So what happens next, and what could this mean for future military policy? Here to break it all down for us is Mark Meadows. He's a former Trump White House chief of staff and senior partner at Conservative Partnership Institute. So, Mark, thanks for joining us once again. What's your reaction to what's going on with this case?
Listen, we're getting a lot of judges that are opining not just on the law, but on really the purview of the executive branch. I think the thing that's most troubling to me is as you see these judges start to be more and more active, in my opinion, with a political bias or at least a political agenda. it is not something that they should be wading into. When you talk about the readiness of our U.S. military, a judge, a district judge, or even a U.S. Court of Appeals judge is not in the best position to say what is good for America and what makes us safer. I can tell you, having been in those situations multiple times while I was in the White House, decisions are made based on a number of different factors, some of which quite frankly, never get articulated publicly. And now to see judges weighing in on the readiness when we spend over $800 billion a year to be ready, it just fails to pass the smell test. I can tell you that this is something that's going to be met with a great pushback from President Trump and his DOJ. But it should. You know, what we've done is we've come to embrace what, quite frankly, just a couple of decades ago would have seen as preposterous in terms of embracing, and yet we now have courts that are finding that rights of individuals that I can't find in the Constitution are somehow being violated.
Mark, I'm curious what your take on the solution is, because it's a tough problem. You can talk about impeachment, right, which I'm fine with talking about it, but to actually do that is basically impossible. There's also, I'm in favor of this as well, the media outlets like ours should scrutinize a lot of these judges if they decide to do egregious things like this. But so what do you think that ultimately should be done here?
It's interesting. Thank you for covering this important topic, but the very fact that you're putting light on it actually helps the American people become better informed. And for far too long, there was not a voice there to actually put the light on these kinds of decisions. And I, like you, look at the impeachment route is not a real viable route. Even if there were enough votes in the House, which I doubt right now that there would be a few defections on the Republican side and probably all the Democrats defecting. Even if you were able to get that done, you're not going to get the threshold in the Senate to actually have a lasting impact. So what needs to be done? I think a couple of things need to be done. One is limiting the jurisdiction of these district court federal judges to basically put an injunction that is across the nation. What we have is venue shopping for judges that are believed to be able to not only make a decision in favor of some of the most progressive left organizations, but they go time and time again to these favorite judges to file a lawsuit. And so we have to not only do that in legislation. I think what we do is, and I've been talking to some of our colleagues, my former colleagues in the House and Senate, to actually put on a must-pass piece of legislation to start to limit the scope of these federal district judges, and then at least it elevates it to a judicial scrutiny that is at a much higher level. But listen, the left is very smart, and the very fact, Matthew, that you're pointing it out is they file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. DOJ is not only working overtime but triple time right now, trying to keep up with this. And so their strategy is to file the lawsuits based on perhaps a very frivolous legal argument, and then appeal it and keep it tied up for years and keep the status quo. I can tell you President Trump and those in DOJ and other areas are not satisfied with the status quo, but neither are the American people. The people that are tuned in right now watching, they've had enough of Washington, D.C. working or not working more accurately for the American people decades and decades and decades. It's time to stop it, but it's also not time just for rhetoric. and your point about the impeachment side of things is we have to get real serious about actually making sure that there's a balance between the three branches of government. And right now, what we're seeing is a few judges being a lot more active in believing that they're commander-in-chief instead of a chief judge.
Well, the people of the American people are sick and tired of this. Like you're saying, in the last year of the Biden administration, the recruitment deficit was over 41,000 military members. Now you see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth come in, and it seems like he has given a boost. Like the people are excited about joining the military again. How have you seen what Pete Hegseth has been able to come in and do in just a couple of months?
Well, listen, it's amazing when the secretary talks about the importance of the fighting men and women, the ones that are willing to go into harm's way, how exciting so much of the American public become. It's not just on the recruitment side of it, but I can tell you there's a renewed sense of patriotism walking through an airport where you see military men and women, and you're not only high-fiving them but thanking them once again for their service. But here's the problem. Under Joe Biden, and I would even say under some Republican administrations prior to Donald Trump, the emphasis has been on a five-sided building that sits on the other side of the Potomac, on the Pentagon. They've grown the size of the Pentagon, and they've had more generals and colonels and majors promoted than ever before, and that's not what it's all about. It's about those rank and file soldiers and sailors and airmen and corpsmen that honestly need to be appreciated. Pete Hegseth does exactly that, and his entire staff is dedicated to that, and he should be applauded, and we should be applauding our men and women in uniform each and every day.
Well, Mark, speaking of the Secretary of Defense, I want to make just 2 points and let you take off on, give us your take on Signalgate. This has been a ridiculous week in many ways because of this, but I note 2 things. One is it's very interesting to me that somehow that Hegseth is being blamed for this very quickly, and that all of a sudden you could see the sharks start to turn on him. That's very strange given what we know about the facts. And then number 2, I do think that people on the right need to acknowledge that this is a serious issue. I have lots of friends out there who are loyal supporters of the president. People who say I'd literally take a bullet for the guy, but this really does concern me. And I think part of the problem is regular people think, I would never do this, and how could this happen at the highest levels? I have my own thoughts about this, but what's your take on all this?
Well, thank you for letting me address it, because the last 4 or 5 days of media blitz that have gone after Secretary Hegseth is just inappropriate. I saw Senator Kelly talk about, well, this is the worst operational security failure in the last 25 years that he has knowledge of. Well, I don't need to point him back to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You talk about an operational security failure. It was one that cost 13 Americans their lives. But here's what the 2 things you mentioned, that you knew 2 things. I know 2 things as well. The minute that this news broke, President Trump was talking to Susie Wiles, talking to his national security advisors and others, and basically saying this can't happen again. Not only can it not happen again, but we need to put protocols in place to make sure that it doesn't. One of the suggestions that I would put forth is an encrypted communication platform that is only available on official phones to be able to do that, and that would limit the scope of it. But the other part of it is that a mistake was made. A journalist was added to this. Did it actually affect the security and the operational security of those on the ground? The answer is no. Many times what happens is a lot of people don't understand that there's an unbelievable coordination effort that has to take place when there's a strike strike among our allies. And so you end up communicating information on secure channels, without a doubt, to some to make sure that activities that happen don't get misinterpreted. That being said, I can tell you, Secretary Hegseth should not take the fall for this. It actually should be addressed. I think in fact, I know it's being addressed, and the whole call for deep investigations, and actually even the judge weighing in saying preserve your documents. The easiest thing to do is to print out that text chain, put it in. Into the official email, preserve it. You've complied with the Federal Records Act, and then outline what needs to be done. I can tell you there's more than enough money to get a secure platform that would actually be allowed to be used. And without me getting into any national security secrets, there are other ways to continue to make sure that American interests are served and the American people are secure. And I'm sure that those are being deployed right now.
Well, Mark, in the few minutes that we have left with you, let's turn our eyes to Capitol Hill and Congress. We see this week that Elise Stefanik is not actually going to go be the UN ambassador. She's going to stay right there as your neighbor there in Congress. And we see then the Trump mandate. How is this going to affect everything? What's next for the agenda at hand?
Listen, I talked to Elise today, actually talked to her and said that even though Congress will be a better place because she's remaining there, the UN will not. And so, my recommendation is that we need to get serious about the American First agenda, not only on Capitol Hill, as you were mentioning, just a few blocks from my office, but we also need to get serious about it at the UN. And quite frankly, the UN has, I think, 194 countries that they, quote, recognize. And it is a jobs program for people that are actually friends and family members of member states. And if anything needs to be changed and America First needs to be put forth, it needs to be done there. Perhaps they work with an acting UN ambassador and wait for the midterms, hopefully where Elise could get renominated. But we've got to have someone that's strong in supporting the president's agenda. And you guys know all too well, there's a whole lot of people out there that put lip service to that and won't actually do that. I can tell you that the president, in putting forth another nominee, needs to make sure that that person has a backbone of steel and not a banana.
Well, thanks, Mark. It is always a pleasure, and that was very good. The signal thoughts alone were great. I haven't heard anyone say quite the same thing yet, and it's been a week full of a lot of tomfoolery, so thank you for that.
It's great to be with you both. Take care. God bless.
Mark, we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks so much. MP, as he was just saying, they need to get to work there in Congress, and they need to get through and push through Trump's agenda, because we see all this time is ticking by. And they're on vacation a lot out there on Capitol Hill. Yeah, I mean, your point is well taken, and no one knows better than Mark Meadows that this needs to happen. It needs to happen now, and the political will, as we've been saying, is there for the mandate, right? But what can't happen is the engine to splutter. You can do that a little bit, right? You can slow down a little bit, but you can't slow down for long. And I think the direct application of power and really threats from the administration to Congress is going to be continually needed right up through the midterms. Well, you know what? We'll continue that conversation because we have Daniel Horowitz next. He's also going to give us his playbook on preventing the COVID era from ever happening again. Coming up. Five years ago this month marked the beginning of the medical martial law during the COVID pandemic. Fathers were arrested for playing with their children in parks, masked Nazis roamed the grocery stores, and the economy is still recovering from the shutdowns. So how can we help ensure that this never happens again? Daniel Horowitz, he's Blaze host of Conservative Review. He recently wrote about this for Blaze News. He's written a book on this. He knows everything that there is to know about this topic. That's why we're bringing him in. So Daniel, First, set the stage for us. What problems are we still trying to overcome right now from COVID?
You know, every time in history when we undergo some sort of a tyranny, some sort of violation of civil rights, we have, like 14th Amendment style rectification. We had slavery that led to the Civil War, and 1 year to the date of the surrender at Appomattox, we had the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which is essentially everything in the 14th Amendment. And then it was codified into the Constitution 3 years later. Here we are 5 years later. And at a federal level, let's start federal, go to the states. At federal level, we have not passed a single piece of legislation to prevent any of this. Forget about vaccines, liability, PrEP Act. I mean, that's sacred. But even what's become verbally consensus, even among a lot of Democrats, the lockdowns were a mistake, even the masking. Why is there no bill to make sure that a president cannot declare a public health emergency and employ all of these restrictions without Congress? Okay, without a vote. Mask mandates that the federal government can never control your breathing again. I don't even see legislation on the horizon. So in this article, I go through an outline of a number of things that we still need to do federal and state.
All right. So run through some of those things for the audience out there now, what ought to be done.
So obviously, again, federally, we need to push this, but, the slim majority. So go to the red states. We've done some things in some states, but most things we haven't done in most red states. To begin with, most states still have not fully ensured that constitutional rights are protected during a public health emergency. Okay, so that any of these recommendations, they cannot be mandatory to take away life, liberty, property, to right to go to church. A couple of states have enacted that, but still too many have not. They need to go after county governments as well. You remember this time 5 years ago, every county garbage man would give a press conference at 7 p.m. All right, here's what I want you to do. And we need to make sure that can't be done. Vaccine stuff, again, it's not going to be done in Congress, but Florida, Louisiana, Idaho just passed a pretty good bill. But we need all the red states to make it clear that it is not okay to mandate a biological product on anyone for any reason. There is no scientific, legal, or moral reason that would ever be true, because if you want it, go get it yourself. mRNA needs to be banned. We need to get it out of the food. We need to preemptively criminalize, both self-spreading vaccines, which is a thing now, and also gain-of-function research. I mean, my gosh, that's sort of the slavery of COVID, the antecedent to all of it. We've only had a couple of states do this. There's a lot of institutions, people suspect in Texas, here at home, Texas, that this is being done in some institutions. And then I got to give a shout out, because we have so many people here in Texas. We have the Texas Medical Board to this day going after hero doctors for having not worn a mask, for having prescribed ivermectin. Their lives are being destroyed. That Texas Medical Board needs to be dealt with. Bob Hall has a bunch of bills on that. But, alas, a lot of this is not moving.
At the federal level, with the Trump administration, whether it's cabinet level appointees or other political appointees that he has, yes, there are some really good ones that people like us are going to get excited about. But on this issue in particular, he's not batting, at 100%, at 1,000 here. He's not going straight across the board. So how do you view what his administration is just setting the table for, at least when it comes to dealing with this issue in particular?
So obviously, HHS has focused a lot under RFK about food and, what goes into food toxins. And, that is an important discussion. Where I think it needs to go is it's got to start with mRNA. Look, as it relates to other vaccines, he's going to want to take his time, start from scratch, do a study. As far as mRNA, we had 5 years of human experimentation as a study, and sadly, we understand what it does. So nobody is more knowledgeable about this than RFK. He needs to get up there and say this was fraudulently done. Pfizer never submitted their subclinical myocarditis study that should have been done, a bunch of things that he needs to force Pfizer and Moderna to start from beginning, yank its approval, and make them submit it again. And, obviously we'll understand the outcome. I would be a little bit surprised and disappointed if we go this year without having that done.
Yeah, that's my question. It seems like, obviously trust but verify. It seems like we know Jay Bhattacharya, for instance, and RFK are not going to hold back, you would think. Be very alarming if, all of a sudden they change course on a dime after everything they've been through and suffered through with these zealots over the last years. So what do you see any positive signs? Do you see any, even if it's just talk at this point, of what the administration, the best people in the administration want to do that aligns with what you're laying out in this article?
So unfortunately, I don't see those signs yet. I think what people are waiting for is for the sub-cabinet. Like you mentioned, people like Bhattacharya just got approved to get in all of the agency heads. It is a complex department. I think we're impatiently waiting and waiting and waiting. And I think, we're coming close to the point where it should be done. With that said, what is a little bit disturbing is that we have the NIH, CMS, FDA nominees going through. We saw David Weldon, who was a pioneer in questioning vaccines. He was supposed to be CDC director. His nomination was defeated. People were hoping Latipo would be picked in his stead, which would have made a lot of sense given, Trump's proclivity to pick people from Florida. He is so well studied on these issues. He was a very mainstream doctor before he became Surgeon General. And he was passed over for someone who really was a Biden appointee. That, again, it is a little disturbing. And I think it's important now for us to say, wait a minute, there's a lot of things with MAHA. We're probably, pummeled with a lot of toxins. But the mRNA is a no-brainer. It's got to go.
Well, Daniel, let's turn our eyes to Congress, specifically in the House, because last night on X, I shared the House calendar showing that their first 5-day work week isn't until June, and they only have 3 weeks the entire year that they have a 5-day work week. Now, Daniel, I don't know how we get this schedule. I don't know if we need to run for office, but $174,000 and not having to work 5 days a week, it sounds like a pretty good deal to me, unless you're the American taxpayers.
Jill, I can't understand this. This is like, it should be like a kid in a candy shop. This is your trifecta. This is your mandate. Heck, I'd have 7 days a week. Just Trump's executive orders, just to keep up with codifying that. Okay. The whole judiciary issue that we have to deal with now. And that's before you get to the fiscal and economic and budget reconciliation. I cannot relate to this. After being away for 2 weeks, they got back this week. Do you know what they even did this week? So there wasn't some major message. I found out that all but 74 Republicans voted to pass a new 7-year loan program for low carbon emission concrete. So we're adding new Green New Deal. I don't even know where this stuff comes from.
But they probably called it something else, so it's fine.
I'm telling you, Jill, I'm trying to be positive. I'm really trying to find it, but it is stupefying. And by the way, just so you know, their budget reconciliation bill, it looks like what they're doing is the spending cuts, I'm not kidding you, are going to be anywhere from $3 billion with a B to $1.5 trillion. So they're allowing the House to write instructions for $1.5 trillion and the Senate a floor of $3 billion. $3 billion out of an $89 trillion 10-year budget.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great stuff. Great stuff. Let me say one thing just to be the contrarian in defense of Congress, which, at the risk of destroying my entire career, which I do not normally defend. But I will say these people, just to stay alive, right, are constantly running for office. So it is true that I'm not fully defending them, but it is true that they have to go back home, right? And they're supposed to come from an actual place in America. And then they have to run for office 24/7. Of course, a lot of them are busy posting influencer videos, et cetera. So it is a little tough. But the problem is we know that even in the time that we see in that calendar, they're not working at all. They're not getting the job done. Do you see any signs of improvement here? Because this is the next obstacle that Trump has to navigate through. And certainly in the beginning, I was thinking, Jill and I were sitting here going, it's great how scared they all were, right? When it came to the confirmations, they were terrified of getting out in front of Trump. But what do you see as the big obstacles coming up? Is Congress going to get in line or no?
So, look, as far as the election is concerned, that's exactly my point. You need to run for election. You got to have a narrative. There's now talk about Republicans have lost or they've suffered a 25-ish point swing in 3 legislative special elections, 2 in Iowa, 1 in Pennsylvania, and now Elise Stefanik had to be hauled back in because they don't think they can hold a Trump plus 20 district. There's a Trump plus 30 district in Florida up next week that they think might be too close. Clearly, there's no narrative. I want our listeners to go to just Google clerk of the House votes, and you could see the roll call votes of the House. Try messaging any of them, right? Just scroll down and try messaging them. Like, for example, this week they should have had a bill. A president can't shut down the country. Congress has to support that. No mandating masks. By now, it's extremely unpopular. This is something you could run on. They're just these weird special interest bills. So I sadly don't see it changing. It's only going to change if Trump calls his shots and is as bold in his interactions with Congress as he is unilaterally at the executive level. And I think that's where he needs to improve upon his first term. Don Bacon, the head of the Rhino Caucus, was out there trashing Trump's tariffs. I don't know. Guys, somehow I think if Chip Roy were doing that, he would get certain treatment. But somehow we don't see these guys being reined in. And relatedly, I must say, he endorsed Lindsey Graham. He endorsed Cindy Hyde-Smith from Mississippi like a year early. At least get something from them before. But you're just cutting out the legs from any leverage to move them to the right. I honestly don't understand it.
Daniel, I mean this as a huge compliment. I match your level of nerdiness with Clerk of the Congress. I often visit that and go check it out. So everybody at home, you need to get on Daniel's level. Thanks so much.
See you later.
Well, has transgenderism run its course? We'll have your answers after this. Well, the trans agenda has been on the show a couple times today, so we thought, why not? Let's just go ahead and lean into it for the poll question for today. So we asked you, have we won the battle against the trans agenda? 6.3% say, yes, it's all over. And then 93.7% say, no, we have a long way to go. Now, I figured that was going to be the case, but we are making small incremental wins. But this just shows you it's the battle versus the war deal.
Shows how based our audience is. I hear a lot of people make midwit comments about, oh, it's over, we won. But our audience knows, no, this is just beginning.
Let's start with the comments. Andrew writes in first. He says, we have won many skirmishes, but the battle is far from over. This ideology is so embedded in our institutions that it will take at least 2 generations to totally destroy. It's going to take a long time, because if you watch any of the lib videos out there, right, like the liberal single women, that is going to take a long time to get those people out, to figure out just, here's some common sense thoughts, and we don't need to push the transing of the kids.
Yeah, you have generations being taught this or taught things that lead to it, and you have how much media? How much media, just a tsunami of this, pushing this crap. So Andrew's great point, and sad but true.
Friend of the show, Terry Schilling, who does a lot of work on this issue up on Capitol Hill and all across the United States. He replies, we still need to pass laws, but the American people want it over with. No better expert on this than Terry. He has heard from thousands, if not millions of people across the United States.
Yeah, so Terry really pioneered this as a campaign issue and ultimately won out because his point there is the ray of hope. He's absolutely right. And he's proven this in campaign after campaign, arguing with everybody in the Republican Party that they should run on this as an 80-20 issue, as people say. And, that's finally happened. So the good news is the tide certainly has turned with the American people. It's just that we have all this crap in our institutions still.
All the crap is still there. Let's go ahead and round it out with Fred for the weekend. The fight against the trans agenda, it's still roaring. No knockout punch yet, but we're in the ring, swinging, but the bell hasn't rung. But stay tuned. You remember the words of Rush Limbaugh. This is what pushing back looks like. They don't give up easily. So if you quote the late, great Maharishi, you're going to make the show. I am a Rush baby.
Yes, same. Look, this is not, it's not hopeless anymore because we see a potential end in sight. But I do think even in all our excitement on the show, right, his point is correct. The battle now, begins in earnest, right? We can see the tide is moving in the right direction, but it's going to take time, and especially it's going to take dedicated effort. No one can let up. It's like these people talking about getting ready for the midterms. What are we doing, right? No one can let up or they will come back and we will lose.
We talk about this issue a lot when I go on friend of the show, Steve Deace, fellow host here at Blaze TV. Whenever I go on his show, this is one of the biggest topics that is always there on the Deace group, basically week in and week out. And I remember last summer thinking, oh man, if even just the LGBTQ agenda was bad in May leading up to it, just wait, because you're about to hit Pride Month. Well, then we were surprised because it wasn't as bad and as in your face as it had been in previous years. So you look at small little wins that we can escalate into a bigger deal. But I know that you want to see the right not only just go through and have small incremental wins, but you want to see them push forward and use the power in a right way.
Yeah, so I think it's really important. I had lunch today with a college president, not something I do every day because there's only like 5 of them, if that, who are worth talking to, who are actually good. Don't quote me on this. Am I on TV? So I was talking to a good college president, and he was making the point about what the Department of Education needs to do in terms of accreditation, because the Department of Education and the federal government, right, has this vested interest in accrediting all the schools. These BS accreditors come and say, like, you're a valid college, and then you can get student loans, et cetera, et cetera. So the federal government has power, right, over accreditation. And in that conversation, I won't go into the details, but it just became clear. It's one more place at which this administration, even if you close down the Department of Education, which you absolutely should do, on your way out, right, you can set things up so that for success, so that you get rid of the corrupt system that exists there, and then you allow, right, new accreditors to rise who are actually going to be good. You just allow freedom among the accreditors. If you just shut everything down or just say, I'm not going to use the power I have, we won't solve a lot of these problems. And you see this come up over and over again, where the easy out for a lot of people is just to say, just get rid of it. Now, in the past, that wasn't even possible. So it was sort of asinine. Like, you're not going to get rid of it until you get the power to get rid of it. And in order to get power, you have to use power. Now you do have the power to shut down and alter the shape of the federal government. So we need to use it wisely. And as we shut things down, we need to set up everything outside, right? So for success, because you have to think, they use the federal government to screw these things up. So as you close things down or alter things, you need to use the power of the government to prop up the good guys. I give you one more example and I stop. And this may be considered controversial, but I just consider it common sense. When it comes to NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, when it comes to National Endowment for the Humanities, when it comes to the Librarian of Congress, these entities are supposed to prop up the culture and history of the United States, humanities in America, and all this sort of thing. It'd be very easy to say, just shut them down. And I'm not opposed to that. Like, that doesn't give me nightmares or anything. But I think the way in which the left has taken over culture, that would be a very, very foolish thing to do. Even if you were going to shut them down, you should take that money and start using it for things that are actually sorely needed when it comes to arts and humanities on the good side, because the other side has been getting pumped billions of dollars into this monstrous thing that's destroying America and America's soul. And so you should use this the other way. And I know that's heresy to say for a lot of people on the right, but I don't care. This is common sense to me. And you can still shut a lot of this down. But if you're not going to use that money for good, think about all the damage that they've done, creating hideous buildings, terrible art, blasphemous art for all this time, and all the people that they persecuted with their DEI policies, etc. Well, you got to right that ship, and you can't be afraid to use power and money to do it. And that's the bottom line.
You talk about shutting down things the right way. Elon and the, I'll say, elder statesman of the Doge team had an interview with Brett Baer last night. I watched it, and they were talking about, oh, you're going to get rid of Social Security and the scare tactics that they were using against the American people. And Elon's like, no, we're finding fraud, and we'll probably end up giving you guys more money back in the end. But it was interesting when they talked about the number of people that they were able to retire within the federal government. And they're like, okay, we want to do these mass layoffs and offer all of these retirement packages for federal workers. And they said, yeah, Elon, that sounds great. We can only process 8,000 of them a month. And Elon went, but what if there are more that want to retire? Well, this is an old, antiquated system that they still have. There's a vault that, in the side of a mountain somewhere in Pennsylvania, and it's still a 1950s style deal. Well, they have to print it out. They have to wheel it in on all these things, and they have, just stacks of paper everywhere. And Elon's like, what do you mean that in 2025, we're still retiring people with pieces of physical paper, right? So they're going through, they are trying to shut things down the right way, but even doing it that way is still going to take some time to update everything because there's a lot to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to reform, and Elon's doing it the right way completely. Those guys are smart. They're looking through in a systematic way. How do we actually make this better? But we just can't be afraid. At Orrin McIntyre, a friend is very good on this at Blaze. You cannot be afraid to use power. How do you think it got this way? And it's not going to go away by magic. The way that they did this was by using power. Power or governance can be good. It's given, the federal government, even lawfully, right, after we reform it, has power for a reason, and you have to use that for good. The psyop from the left is like, oh, no, you can't do that. Somehow that's not constitutional, to use constitutional powers for constitutional ends, and that is false.
Well, let's go all the way back to the top of the show. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says there's a shadow government that we can go through and use. You guys, we don't need to use the real government. We can use this fake one that we have set up here on the side. And that's exactly what we're trying to fight against here on the show. And that's what the Trump agenda is trying to do. And that's where we get the mandate. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll enjoy ours as well. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Make governance great again.